Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode. I'm absolutely thrilled today to have with me Jen Hardy. Jen, first of all, welcome and thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me today.
Thank you for making the time. I'm excited to chat.
Jen has spent a large part of her academic and professional career in and around the Hill Country, and she has a great story. So I asked her if she'd come on and tell us a little bit about it. So why don't you tell us where you grew up and what you did that got you to Kerrville?
Yeah. So I grew up in Austin, Texas. I've actually been in Texas since I was 2 years old. So I claim it. I claim being a Texan, but I didn't get to Austin until I was 7 and I did end up graduating from Westlake High School. But the interesting part about how I ended up in Kerrville is I had played soccer in high school, didn't make varsity till I was a senior. And anybody who knows Westlake was an extremely competitive program. Even my senior year, there were 11 seniors, I think 9 of which were committed to college athletics. And I left high school not expecting to play soccer and not expecting to go to college either. And about, I want to say, maybe 3 to 4 weeks before the college season would start, I found out that there had been a coach, the Schreiner head coach, had been asking about me, and there was just some miscommunication between me and my high school coach. And I ended up going to Schreiner. I think it was 3 weeks before school actually started, and walking around the campus and just being like, you know what? I've got no other options. I have no other plans. And I didn't know if I wanted to do this, but this feels good. And I said yes. And I showed up actually 2 days after they started 3 days. And I have not worked out in 3 months. And it was awful. I lost 10 pounds in about 10 days because we literally worked out at 6 a.m., noon, and 6 for 10 weeks or for 10 days straight. And it was awful and beautiful all at the same time.
So tell us about the Schreiner soccer program when you started.
Yeah. So I actually started when Schreiner University was still Schreiner College. That's how long ago it was. And it was actually still considered an NAIA program, not a D3 program. That happened literally, I think, in the middle of my sophomore year. We went Division 3 out of NAIA and became Schreiner University instead of Schreiner College. And I was there. It was the second year of the soccer program's existence. And we had maybe 12 players, if that. And I would say 4 to 5 of those 12 we had stolen from volleyball and softball just to field the team. And it was coming from Westlake, highly competitive state championship program, 70 to 80 players on 3 different teams, sometimes a freshman team, a JVA, a JVB, to barely having enough to field a team and not having players that had all even played high school, let alone club. It was a shock to the system, but also really invigorating in a way that I didn't expect.
How was it invigorating?
I got to discover who I really was as an athlete. I got to discover who I really was as a leader, who I really am when it comes to other females, especially in a team setting, because I knew I couldn't carry the team. I was, and this isn't me boasting, I was the best player on the team, if not one of the top 3 players on the team. And I knew that the only way we were going to have any version of success was to figure out how to play to the strengths of the people around me, how to lift them up around me, and how to get them figuring out how to play with each other, knowing your strengths, knowing your weaknesses, and being okay with playing to those and away from those. Like, for example, knowing that an outside mid can only get the ball when she crosses it to like the front of the 18, which is not very far. But knowing that and be like, okay, when she's got the ball, we're going to have to go to that side of the 18 to make sure that we have some version of success versus assuming she's going to be able to get it where she's never going to get it. And we didn't win a lot of games. We lost a lot of games, but it's given me a perspective of when I became a coach of how to support athletes who, especially when they were athletes like me who came into my program at Vandegrift, where we also only had 16 players our first year. they didn't feel challenged because we were playing I think we were in a 3A division and they weren't feeling challenged. And so I got to pull in, hey, your challenge is going to be, how do you make everybody around you better? How do you become a leader in that way? So it's really something that transferred over into who I've become as an adult and now even with what I'm doing in all of our programs.
Could you talk to us a little bit about your academic experience in Schreiner? For instance, what was your major?
So my major when I started was graphic design. That's what I started out. It only lasted about a semester. Turns out that being someone who enjoys art is not the same thing as someone who does art on a computer. So I immediately ended up switching over after taking a strength and conditioning class with Dr. Shaw, who just retired last year. One of my absolute favorite professors of all time. Anyone who's ever been in Schreiner, anyone in Kerrville probably knows who Dr. Shaw, Barry Shaw, amazing man. And I fell in love with that strength and conditioning class and then ended up changing my major immediately to exercise science, thinking that I was going to be the first female collegiate strength coach because those didn't exist back then.
And what did that degree program consist of at that time?
So at that time, it's funny, there were literally, I think my first 2 years, my freshman and sophomore year, it was primarily Dr. Shaw and Mr. Wells, Tom Wells, who also is well known in the community, who pretty much ran the entire program. And it wasn't until late sophomore year, junior year, they started bringing in a separate exercise science professor and really getting into other elements. So we got bits and pieces of kinesiology, of biomechanics, of anatomy and physiology, but also getting into those advanced anatomy and physiology and getting into the exercise physiology, which I was terrible at, by the way. It's so hard. That class is so confusing. But I loved the way that Barry Shaw, the way he taught exercise science, the way he taught specifically biomechanics and kinesiology. I got to talk to him a couple, I say oh my gosh, it's been a year now. I did the commencement speech for Schreiner in 2023, December 23, and he and I got to talk. And I told him that I still remember an exercise he had us do where at the beginning of the semester, we had to tell him how to get off the floor. He laid down on his back on the floor and we had to use commands to help him figure out how to sit up, how to push himself off the ground, stand up and get him to fully standing, and he timed it. Now that we had all the appropriate language, like flexion, for example, extension, then we had to use that language to get him off the floor and see if we could get him off the floor and fully standing faster. And he was like, I still do that exercise. He's like, I still do that with my students every semester. And I was like, yeah, we were terrible at it. We ended up doing worse at the end of the semester than at the beginning. But he just had such a great style of teaching and making it fun.
What was it like coming from Austin Westlake to Kerrville and Schreiner University, more from a social perspective?
From easily being someone who could be a face in the crowd and that nobody knew, to all of a sudden everybody knew who you were. Everybody knew who you were. Everybody knew everything about you. You knew everyone else. Everyone went to every game. Everyone was at every basketball game, every volleyball game, every soccer game. Whereas at Westlake, it was pretty much football, let's be honest. Some people came out to other sports, but you definitely went from, in my personal opinion, I went from feeling like an unknown to a family to being known by everyone. And honestly, an opportunity to completely rewrite who I knew myself to be, because no one was from Westlake at Schreiner. I knew no one. We had 1,600 students total, and that included commuters and people who lived on campus. Westlake was bigger, but it's actually taking me a lot of time to realize how much of a gift that really was.
Yeah, I went the other way. I went to UT, and at that time, UT was bigger than my hometown. I
Mm.
went from having lived in a town since third grade, knowing everyone, knowing everything about everyone, to an anonymity at its height, which I actually craved. But now bring us up to graduation. And what did you do post grad from Schreiner?
So I graduated with an exercise science degree, and I ended up going into personal training for a little while. My father was in the fitness industry, is in the fitness industry, has been for 50 years. And so obviously he had connections and was like, hey, you can go here and start personal training. And I got into personal training and realized I really don't like the general public. I just I couldn't wrap my brain around how can you pay me back then even $5,000 for 12 training sessions and then just complain and whine the entire time. And I'm like, I can't do this. This is awful. Long story short, I ended up going back to Schreiner and getting my teaching certification, which I hadn't graduated with, per the recommendation of my dad. And I was like, yeah, whatever, I'll go get it. Mind you, I had no desire to be a teacher whatsoever. That terrified me more than anything. And lo and behold, end up being a teacher. The world, that things happen the way they happen. And I ended up going back to Kerrville, not even a year later in 2004, and becoming a sixth grade teacher and JV soccer coach.
And where did you start?
I was at BT Wilson as a sixth grade teacher. And it was, so when I went back to Schreiner to get my teaching education, it was more of those emergency certification programs. So it was a sped up one. So I had no experience in a classroom whatsoever. So my first day in a class, they actually put me in a reading study skills class. It was an elective class with 6 kids. And my first day of teaching, a child at the end of class went leaping across the desks with a pencil to attempt to tap the hand of the child across from him. And luckily was not successful, but they left the room. Things were fine. And I'm literally just standing there, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? What am I doing here? And also coaching. Oh man, I was 24 years old. I was still playing competitively as much as I could. And now I was coaching other players and I had so much to learn.
So tell us about your coaching progression in soccer. You've had some quite success, or some quite success. So tell us about that part of your professional career.
Yeah, so Shannon Sletton was the head coach in Kerrville, and I am grateful to her forever. Her lessons and her knowledge and her leadership and guidance followed me when I became a head coach myself, and I tell her that all the time. But as my first 4 years as a JV coach, like I literally called her and apologized to her after my second year as a head coach. I was like, oh my God, I was awful. I'm so sorry. Because I was, again, young and had no idea what I was doing and didn't think I wanted to be a teacher, didn't think I wanted to be a coach. What was I doing? Why was I here? And she got the brunt of that. I would show up late. I would not show up at all sometimes. I would complain and whine and just be a brat, to be perfectly honest. I would compete with her and try to make GV better than varsity. It was yucky. But again, beautiful lessons learned, because then I go to Austin and get an opportunity to open a huge 4A school with Vandergrift. Brand new, start a program from scratch. First year as a head coach. Yeah. And again, 16 players, build that program to over 80, trying out, ending up with 3 teams by the time I left in 2018, having a state championship. We actually had a state gold, silver, and bronze in a 4A, a 5A, and a 6A, and really being able to figure out how to grow as a coach along the way, because I just took all of my unresolved trauma as a high school athlete into being a coach. And I think a lot of coaches might do that as well at first.
That's really what I wanted to explore next with you, Jen. How did coaching, not how did your coaching help your athletes grow? How did coaching help you grow?
I would say when the growth that really happened was, it would have been 8 years in, sounds like a long time. 4 years into, actually, no, it was 7 years, 3 years into being a head coach. We had just lost a playoff game against Cedar Park, and hard loss, furthest we've made it in playoffs so far. And it was a team that really could have gone to state and really gone all the way. And we were all just, I can't believe we didn't make it that far. And about, I don't know, midsummer, I find out that there were some seniors who had no desire to continue to play, that they, in essence, consciously or unconsciously threw the game. They didn't want to keep going into playoffs. They were done. And it wasn't all the seniors. It was a few of them and a couple of juniors. And I was upset when I found that out, but more than anything, I was upset with how did I miss that? How is that where they got? When my mission as a coach was to make sure athletes left the program still having joy and passion for the sport. And if that was my mission, along with feeling heard, seen, and known, and I just had a group of athletes want to give up in the middle of playoffs because they're tired, done, and don't want to play anymore, what am I not doing right? And it was a really good, I don't even want to say smack in the face. It was a punch to the gut where I just had to start looking at what am I not doing and what am I missing? And I really did start to see how I was making it all about me. I wasn't noticing the things that were right under my nose because, again, it was right about me. And that really is what it boiled down to. It was how am I looking? Or do they like me? Am I important? Am I making sure that we're successful versus what do they need? And how do I be who they need me to be? And how do I have them fit? How do I fit into what they need versus fitting them into what I need? And when I changed a lot of those elements, and I can give specific examples, the next season, not only did we go to state, we won state.
So I've had periods of professional and personal growth in my life, and it's generally involved others. It could be others who present a framework for me, to me, that I can do an assessment or a self-assessment. I've had others help me through that journey. What was the sort of the tools you used? Was it talking to others? Was it having a framework to look through some of these things? Was it talking to other coaches, reading books on coaching, all of the above, none of the above?
Yeah. Thanks to Shannon, I had one thing that I would do every season, which is I let the players anonymously evaluate me. Let's just say that I would read through those with a bottle of wine back then, not just a glass. They got one assessment that was with their name on it, and it was stuff they really wanted me to know specifically to them. And they got a separate assessment of me as a coach where they could anonymously let me know elements of how I was showing up, what I was doing, what they needed to tell me the things that they still didn't feel comfortable telling me. That in and of itself, again, while very difficult to swallow, but got easier along the way as I realized, again, it's not about me, it's about what they need. That was huge because there were so many things I could have never known had I not given them a chance to have that anonymity to let me know. And it was, again, a huge gift to know that information. But also, I started to build really strong relationships with my captains. And my captains were my eyes and ears. And I would let them know I will never, ever throw you under the bus. But I need you to tell me what I need to know because there's things I know I don't know that you're going to know. You got to be able to tell me. I will never throw you in the bus. I will completely respect you. And I will almost always try to help you and your other captains take it back to the team and work through it. But I just need to know what's going on. I have to have a pulse to the ground of what's happening. And that was huge because they really did tell me. And honestly, eventually, as the program kept building and I kept getting better as a coach, athletes started to realize my door was always open. I will talk to you about anything. Yes, even playing time, right? I will talk to you about everything if you're willing to hear the answer that you may not like hearing. And I set that up with them often as well. So receiving that feedback from anonymously, or them coming to me through the door, or them having team meetings with me. And yes, you better believe I started reading all the books. I started doing all the courses. I was doing everything I could because I felt like I had been figuring it out isn't giving these kids answers.
So, Jen, at some point you transitioned out of coaching into what I'm going to call another career, if that's fair. You may see it as a direct link, so I don't know. So, what are you doing now?
Yeah, and it's funny. That's the joke, right? I left teaching and coaching to go find out who I was and what I really wanted to do. And it turns out I'm a teacher and a coach, just not in public education. So yeah, there's a direct link, but I had no idea that was going to happen. So now my business partner and I, we we support high stress professionals to overcome burnout, build emotional literacy, and restore joy for life by working through them with workshops, with keynote speaking, or even private coaching to really better understand themselves, better understand their reactions, and how they can navigate uncertainty and stress in a way that really enlivens your experience of life versus undermining it.
And tell us about the company you and your business partner have.
Yeah, so it's the Academy of MotivAction. Irina Alexander is the CEO and founder, and I am her COO. And we just happen to be besties. We met about 5 years ago and have been supporting each other for a while and decided to just go into this together, see what would happen. And through the last year and a half, we've developed a framework called CARES. It's the CARES approach, and it is blended into anything and everything that we do with high stress professionals, specifically, definitely first responders, educators, corporate executives. And it stands for communication, awareness, resilience, emotional literacy, and self mastery. But again, that's an actual framework that we build into any training that we do with individuals or with teams.
I wasn't sure where to slot this next topic in, so I've waited till now. But you gave, and you've actually mentioned it, you gave a commencement at Schreiner. And I know you're incredibly proud of that, but could you tell us how that came about, sort of what the dynamics were, and how you felt about your remarks after you made them?
Oh, gosh, yeah. I'm old enough to a point where most of my fellow classmates and teammates who have decided to are now in administrative and leadership roles at Schreiner. And in 2023, they were doing the Centennial Women's Leadership Conference. And a friend of mine, Matt Goodwin, I can't even remember what his role is at Schreiner right now. I want to say it's in student affairs or athletics. He put my name on the table as one of the speakers, the three speakers for that event. And so first I got to go speak to over 300 people, which was the biggest audience I had spoken to in that capacity thus far, on imposter syndrome at the Centennial Women's Leadership event. And that was pivotal in and of itself, because I got to share some very specific elements of my journey at Schreiner in regards to imposter syndrome and how I've overcome it and what was there and how much I used to degrade Schreiner and being there in the first place, until I realized just how much of a gift that school has been to me. And that speech led to Dr. McCormick, who was in the audience, the president for Schreiner. He asked me to come to his office after that speech was over and invited me to be the December commencement speaker. And he wanted to make sure I knew that, like, the December commencement was not just December. It's not just not the main graduation. We still have, because we have so many non-traditional graduates, it's still going to be a substantial event. And he's such a unique, incredible president, and has an incredible vibe and perspective of how to support his students. And I just really appreciated that about him, and couldn't say no to that. So I took on the opportunity for the commencement speech, which was over 1,000 people. I don't know how many people it actually was, but definitely the largest audience I've spoken to thus far. And I got to talk about how not to let what you do define who you are, and recognizing that your value isn't in what you do, it's how you show up in the world. And it was cool. My mom and my sister and my family were at both events, and it was something I'll never forget on both occasions.
That's great. Jen, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode, but before we leave, I wanted to ask you if our listeners wanted to connect with you or perhaps find out more information about your current business, what would be the best place or places for them to go?
First, I would say just you can email me, Jen with one N, at academyofmotivaction.com. You can go to our website, motivaction.academy, that has all kinds of ways to connect with us. And then I'm on all of the socials, not all of them. I'm on Instagram, _Jen Hardy, on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, not on TikTok. I get sucked into it too easily. I just don't even go there. But any of those ways are great ways to connect and set up an opportunity to chat and just see how we or I can best support you or your teams, or you privately.
If you're listening to this in the audio format and you're looking for Jen on LinkedIn, she's the one with the very long black hair. That Jen Hardy. So, Jen, I wanted to thank you again for taking the time to visit with me, and I hope we can continue this conversation.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it so much. Thank you.